Yay. You guys all ready for this? Now you know. So if you are new here, you've picked a unique morning to come. We're starting a new series this morning that we're actually calling Be Here. So this was not just a intentionally vague call to action the last 5 weeks, just to pique your curiosity. The name of this series is Be Here, and that phrase, I'm hoping, will become something of an anthem for us. It really is the vision for the series, which I'll talk more about in a second. So this is a series about the church. Not the church in general, although our conversation is clearly going to involve issues concerning the church in general. I'll talk more about that in a second. This series is about our church, Waterville Community Church. I asked you to be here today and for the next several weeks for this series so that we can have a serious conversation about being here. How it is that we came to be here, how important it is for us to be here, and maybe most importantly, what I think it's going to take in the next season of our life together so that 25 years from now, we still get to be here. Okay? I know over the last month, I have told you that we have an exciting announcement to make, something to show you that's going to seriously impact our future, or at least could. At the risk of really frustrating you, I'm going to make you wait one more week for that announcement. Okay? Now listen, I had someone throw something at me first service. Okay? It's okay. I need you to trust me here. One, you're not going to be disappointed. Two, what I'm going to show you next week and what I'm going to invite us to do together isn't going to matter to you. And you're not going to understand it. And you're not going to be willing to make the sacrifices that it would take to do it together if you don't seriously deal with what I'm going to say to you today. So today is the necessary groundwork for next week and for the weeks after that. Okay, so that's why I'm doing this. I thought about, do I just make the announcement week 1? It's they're going to be upset if I don't. I could pull a real jerk move and wait till week 4. But I can't do that. They'll mutiny. So it's week 2. And like I said, you won't be disappointed. You'll understand the reasoning for it. So I'm going to ask you to trust me on that. Okay, let's begin. Let's begin at the beginning when it refers to being here, right? When we talk about being here at its most basic level, we are talking about our existence. That we live, we are here, we exist. And you and I, as people of faith, we get together every week to bear witness as to why. That as people of faith, we do not think that our existence is an accident or that it is random. We do not agree with what one author of a book I recently finished, he referred to us as finely ornamented apes. Some of us more finely ornamented than others. But we do not believe the inevitable byproduct or outcome of some mindless, impersonal evolutionary process. As people of faith, we believe in God. And that is not a small thing. We believe that there is a personal God who is the primary cause of all things, of our existence. It is only because of God that we get to be here at all. And that has implications for life. That has implications for what it means to have life, to be human, the meaning of life. The Apostle Paul shares these implications about as succinctly as I think you can. In a letter that he wrote to the church in the city of Rome, this is what he says. He says, "For everything comes from him and exists by his power and is intended for his glory. All glory to him forever, amen." That's the New Living Translation. In another English translation of the Bible, that verse is even more succinct. Paul says, all things are from God and through God and to God. All things are from God, Paul says. God is the creator of all things, the primary cause of all existence. But God doesn't just create, God also sustains. All things are not just from God, they are through God. In another place, Paul would say, God is literally, moment by moment, actively holding all of creation together through Christ. God doesn't just create, God sustains what God creates. And because all things are from God and all things are through God, Paul's vision, hope, is that all things are to God. Not just to the glory of God, as that translation makes it kind of sound, but literally all things back to God. That there is no reality that is somehow outside of God, from, through, and to. And that has implications for what it means to be human. That what it means to be human in this place, to have existence, is about God through and through. One way that I think about saying this is, if all things are from God and all things are through God and all things are to God, that probably demands some kind of response from all things, right? And if I had to name the responses that seem appropriate in my life, one would be gratitude, and the other would be a sense of responsibility. That there really is nothing fuller about being human than aligning my life with God and God's purposes for my life and for the world. That as faith people, we owe everything to God. We're only here because of God. So there really shouldn't be anything in our life that is more important to us, a greater priority to us, than participating with God in God's work in the world. That's central to how we understand who we are and what it means to be human in this world. And I think Jesus seems to have thought that in order for the world to flourish, that there needs to be a group of people in the world who actually believe that and try and align their lives with it. You know, Jesus referred to his followers as salt and light, called them the salt of the earth and the light of the world. It's like Jesus imagined this world that he so loves, apart from a group of people functioning as light and salt, would be a pretty dark and self-destructive place. That Christian people, Jesus followers, are supposed to be like a lighthouse. If you imagine the world a kind of dark and turbulent sea, and people kind of aimlessly floating on it, not real sure where they're going or how to get home to where they belong. The world needs a group of people who can point the way, help them to find safe harbor in the God who created them and sustains them and in whom they are to live and find life and identity. That Jesus' followers are supposed to be like preservation agents. We're supposed to be the kinds of people who are always cultivating and safeguarding what is good and true and right and beautiful in the world. That if the world were left to its own devices, if the world were left to believe that it created itself, that somehow it can hold itself together by its own internal logic, and that there is no one outside of itself in whom it is supposed to find its identity and to whom it ought to be grateful and responsible, Jesus seems to think that reality would be dark and self-destructive. The world needs a group of people in it who believe that all things come from God and through God and to God. That group of people is supposed to be the church. The world needs the church to be here. But not in theory, not in general, because the church isn't a theory. It isn't an idea. It's not a concept. Which is to say that you and I, if we are salt and light in the world, we are never salt and light theoretically. We are only ever salt and light concretely. And that means in specific places or particular places and at particular moments. So let's talk about place for a second. The Apostle Paul refers to the church as the body of Christ. Many of you are familiar with that language. Among other things, what Paul is saying is that the church is a gathering of people, a group of people, a community of people, that when they get together, they are the embodiment of Jesus in that particular place. The church is not just an organization. It's not like some place you come to get, some spiritual product. It is a group of people. Jesus is not physically present in this world as an individual man wandering the dusty roads of Galilee anymore. That does not mean Jesus is not physically present in this world. Today, Jesus is physically present whenever a group of people who believe in him and seek to align their lives with his get together in a particular place and commit themselves to living together in a particular way. When they do that, when they get together in his name, Paul is saying there is the embodiment of Jesus in the world. So the world needs the church, but the world needs the church particularly, which is to say particular worlds need particular churches. Every place in the world, every community needs the church. And for 25 years, this has been our place. This has been our community. This has been our here. 25 years ago, people, most of whom you have never met and you do not know, they sensed a call. They sensed God calling them to put a church here, right here on this corner, 8217 Dutch Road. The owner of this property at the time was this vagabond who wandered the country in an RV. And in a world without cell phones or laptops or Wi-Fi, somehow they got a hold of this guy, who, as Providence would have it, was driving through town that week. The senior pastor and a member of the board, they met this guy in his RV. And they pitched him the idea to buy this property so that they could build a church. And the guy agreed to sell it to him. After they bought the land, the owner of the property wrote them a letter, wrote our church a letter. And in that letter, he said, it gives me great pleasure to know that the land that so nourished my relatives, this was farmland, the land that so nourished my relatives will provide nourishment for your souls and for the community. It will become a farm of the ultimate source. And for 25 years, gang, that's what it's been. That's what it's been. This church right here on this corner for 25 years has provided nourishment for people's souls, and this institution has provided nourishment for this community. 25 years ago, a group of people discerned that they were supposed to put a church here, to be here, in this place, because this place needed a church, they thought. And then they did what was necessary to make that happen. This is still our place. This is still our corner, still our community, still our here. But when I say particular worlds need particular churches, I'm not just talking about particular locations. I'm talking about particular moments, time. Not all worlds are created equally. And the world that we are living in today is a very different world than it was 25 years ago. Which is to say that what it means to be a church here is different than what it meant to be a church here 25 years ago. 25 years ago, churches were popping up like drugstores. It didn't really matter who was leading them or where they were. If you put up a church, people were going to come to it. That was sort of the nature of the world 25 or 30 years ago. The exact opposite is true today. You may not know this, but churches in the rest of the world are growing. The church is growing in most places in the world. The world that you and I live in is far more religious today than it has ever been. But the church in Western culture, Western Europe, Australia, and America, in that place, the church has been dying for 50 years. Instead of popping up like drugstores today, churches are closing like box stores. Hundreds a day. We are in a very, very different cultural moment as a church. It's unprecedented. No previous generation of Christian churches in our culture has faced the reality that the church is facing in Western culture today. I don't think, this might be a little overly dramatic, but I don't think it's too much to say, within my lifetime, given the trends and the way that it's going, within my lifetime, every church in the Anthony Wayne area will be gone. Like totally uninhabited. It will go the same direction that churches have gone in Western Europe and Australia. They will all be museums or microbrews or whatever else they'll turn into. But they won't be churches anymore. That's just the moment that we're in. Our vision as a church for Waterville Community Church is that if every other church goes away, we will still be here 25 years from now. And that may not sound much to you like a vision. The truth of the matter is, 25 years ago, someone like me could have stood up in front of you and said, our vision is to reach 10,000 people in 2.5 years, and here's how we're going to do it. And everybody would have gone, yeah, let's go. It's a different world. It's a different season. And if you watch the seasons that the people of Israel go through, there are seasons where they can just, close their eyes, throw an arrow, and hit their target. Everything is going fine. Nothing but green pastures and sunny skies. But there are also seasons where God says to them, time to hunker down. Because everything around you is going to die and it's going to go away and it's going to take a while. I was just reading this morning. There's an obscure minor prophet in the Old Testament named Habakkuk. And he starts his prophecy by looking around and going, God, where are you? Because I'm looking around at the world and what I see death and violence and destruction. The wicked outnumber the righteous. There's no justice in the courts. What's going on? And God's response to him is to say, it's going to be a little while. Righteousness ultimately will win, but it's going to take some time. But for righteousness to win between now and then, you are going to have to be faithful. You're going to have to still be here. So when I tell you that the way Western culture is going is that people are leaving churches in droves, and 25 years from now, or certainly within my lifetime, every church in our particular our community could be gone, I don't think that's overly dramatic. That's just the way things are going. And when I say that a vision is to say, what if 25 years from now, we're still here? And here's why. I think our particular world, which does not mean this corner, our particular moment, cultural moment, I think it needs a particular church like ours. And please understand, I am not trying to be exceptional in that regard. This is not some triumphal exceptionalism message about how we're better than other churches. Please do not hear that. I'm trying to match for you the moment we're in and the kind of church that by God's grace we've become. Because the truth of the matter is, most people who leave churches today, they do so because the faith system they inherited, it's not workable for them anymore. They don't understand it. It causes problems. They see hypocrisy in it. Modern culture is raising all kinds of questions they can't answer. So they don't feel like they can authentically embody Christian faith in the world. They're not necessarily ready to give up on Jesus, but they don't know how to reimagine what it means to be a Christian in this world. And they assume, wrongly, that there are no places that can help them with that can help them reimagine what it means to believe in Jesus and to align your life with his in an authentic way in the world. But gang, by God's grace, that is precisely what this place has become. And I know you know that because you're the ones who have told me that. Dude, when I started here 11 years ago, I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't. I had no idea what I was doing. All I thought to do was get up in front of people and talk about Jesus. And eventually, people will see how good and beautiful and true Jesus is, and they will just want to follow Jesus. That's all I knew how to do. But the strangest thing happened when I started doing that. I started realizing that there were so many people who had what they called Christian faith, and it had nothing to do with Jesus. In fact, when they talked about God, they talked about a God I did not recognize. And at that point, I realized, okay, this is our message. This is our sermon. And we started preaching that sermon week after week after week after week. And in the last 11 years, I have lost count how many times somebody has said to me, Mike, I've never been to a church like this. Or, this is the first church I've ever been to where fill in the blank. I remember once a guy sitting in that chair right over there. I got done giving a message. He came up to me after the sermon and he said, I didn't know I was allowed to believe that. That is such good news. We have someone in our church that refers to this place as a unicorn church, as in mythical, as in it doesn't exist other places. I had someone in our church remind me just this week, what makes this place so special is that we preach a more beautiful gospel, which is news about who God is. And it's good news because God is good, and we know that because God is just like Jesus. And I have watched over and over and over and over again people come into our church and they sit down, and at some point they are confronted with this news, this good news that God is just like Jesus. And then I watch, just like it happened in my life, I watch this domino cascade effect happen in their life. They start rethinking things. They start asking questions. They start wrestling. They start struggling. And just over time, you just watch it as they hang in, and it completely revolutionizes their faith and totally transforms their life. See, when you're living in a world where people are deconstructing everything and they don't feel like they can authentically be Christians in the world, you need churches that can help them reimagine what it means to be a Christ follower. The Christian church has a branding problem. And there are very few churches that can rebrand Christianity in this culture. I think by God's grace, we've become one of those places. But there's an author I read just this week. He said, I've always been pro-church, and I always used to think that like the crazy versions of Christianity were the exceptions. 99% of the church is good and healthy and right, and there's that 1% that's just like bonkers. He says, I wonder if it's the opposite. Now, I wonder if 99% of what we see and hear and experience as Christianity is bonkers. And there's that like 1% that's rare and sane and healthy. Now, he's obviously not right one way or the other. But I think by God's grace, we're one of those rare, sane, healthy churches. And the world needs that place. If the world needs the church to be here, particular worlds need particular churches. And this cultural moment needs churches that can speak that language, that can create spaces, right? Because we believe that God is just like Jesus. We can cut through all the clutter, can't we? What is Christianity about? What is all of this church faith stuff about? It's about aligning ourselves with the God who creates us and sustains us and to whom all of life subsists. It's about becoming perfect in love, just like God's perfect in love. Because we believe God's just like Jesus, we can be flexible and generous. We can invite questions and wrestling and dialogue. This is just who we've become. It is the niche in the spiritual market, if you will. That's our place. And like it or not, in the years and decades to come, that market is going to get much, much, much bigger. This world needs churches like ours to be here. But for that to happen, here's the thing. For that to happen, it's going to take more than a compelling culture. If we're going to be here 25 years from now, we need to take the next step in the sort of evolutionary journey of our organization. Because a compelling culture is not enough. I'm a country music fan. I apologize if that, discredits me in your eyes. There's a country music artist named Ashley Price, and she wrote a song called When the Bones Are Good. And one of the lines in the song is, if the bones are good, the rest don't matter. And I wish that were true. I do. I wish it were true because I think our spiritual bones are good. Our theological center, our culture, our mission, our team, it's good. Guys, we have spent the last 10 years doing what anybody in organizational leadership will tell you is the hard work. It's the behind-the-scenes work. It's figuring out who you are and what you care about and what you're trying to do and how you're going to do it. It's creating that unique and compelling culture that I say it, and you all nod your heads because you just feel it when you're here. But it's not enough to just have that culture. If that culture is going to be here 25 years from now, if it's going to have staying power, the hard reality is you got to add organizational supports to it. Kind of like a trellis to a vine, you've got to give it infrastructure that it can grow up and in and through and around. That's the next step in our journey together. We have to add to the culture that we've created or that God has created here. We've got to add to that culture infrastructure so that it can grow. It's time for our church to grow. If it doesn't grow, it will die. That's just the hard reality of it. But in order for it to grow, growth in churches is almost always a structural thing because structures are spiritual. So the next step in our journey together to take this culture that's been created that is a gift, it's to take an infrastructure step. That's the season we're stepping into. It's a sort of broad infrastructure initiative. A big part of that infrastructure is internal. It's stuff that you may not ever experience directly. It's systems and structures and procedures and processes and metrics. It's the kind of stuff that for a lot of you make your eyes glaze over. But it's the stuff you got to do. It's getting the right people doing the right things and getting everybody aligned around the same initiatives and vision. And since COVID, that's what we've been working on because COVID forced us. COVID was obviously awful for the world in many ways. Organizationally, it almost killed Landon. But for the rest of us, it was necessary for us. It was necessary for us. Since COVID, we have named the niche in the market for us. We are a church that can rebrand Christianity in Western culture. We can participate in that vision. Very few churches can do that. We can do that. We've been doing that. We've named our identity. We're going to be a vocational school. This is going to be a teaching and learning place. This is going to be a place where you're going to learn to apprentice yourself to Jesus, or you're not going to stay here. We're not playing church. Churches that play church will not be here 25 years from now. We don't have a culture that supports that anymore. We're either going to be people who are serious about apprenticing ourselves to Jesus, or this place will be gone. That's why we've named ourselves a learning institution. We've named our mission of learning love. We've started putting key programming in place, like our formation groups that are consistent with that vision and with that mission. We've reorganized some of our staffing behind the scenes and who's doing what. And before this series is over, I will share with you some of the qualitative and quantitative impact that's having. The reality is we are growing. Our church is growing. So a lot of infrastructure is internal. It's behind the scenes. It's people and it's programs. But infrastructure is not limited to the internals. It is also external. It is not just people and programs. It is also drywall and shingles and blacktop. 25 years ago, when our forebears felt the call, discerned the call to put a church here, in order to be faithful to that call, they had to pool their resources and they had to construct an institution. If this church is going to be here 25 years from now, we are going to have to do the same. You cannot detach the conversation about being here and the importance of being here. You can't detach that from the physical resource that makes being here possible and gives it form and shape and function. So if you wanted to know the exciting thing I'm going to show you next week, it has to do with our building. I'm going to show you a possibility for our future. And I'm going to call us to sacrificially engage in the process of making that a reality. Because it's one major part of a broader infrastructure initiative that if we don't take on 25 years from now, our church will not be here. But for now, so you got to be here next week to hear that. But for now, listen, that's why I did what I did today. Because the fact of the matter is, if I don't share this vision with you, if you don't understand it, and if it doesn't resonate with you, then what I'm going to show you next week and what I'm going to call us to do is not going to matter to you. If you don't really believe that you come from God and your existence is through God and everything is to God, if you don't sense in you a deep gratitude and responsibility to God, if the most important thing in your life is anything other than finding yourself in God and participating in whatever God has for the world, then what I'm going to show you is not going to matter to you. You're not going to care enough. If you don't genuinely believe that the world needs the church, and I understand there are a lot of people who think it doesn't. If you don't believe that the world needs the church, people who are light and salt in a dark and self-destructive place, or that our particular world needs a particular church like ours, well, then what I'm going to show you next week and what I'm going to invite us to is it's not going to matter to you. But if you do believe that you come from God, if that's the source, the seat of your identity, if it's the thing that matters to you the most, if you really do believe the world needs the church and our world needs a church like ours, well, then maybe you'll be willing to do what our forebears did. Right? It fell to them. It fell to them to make sure that there was a church to be here. It falls to us to do what is necessary if 25 years from now, Waterville Community Church still gets to be here. That's my vision. That's my hope. My hope is that you'll catch it. You'll catch it, and we'll do this together. Okay. We're going to finish our service this morning by taking communion, which we do every week. Right? Communion is our reminder that our God comes to be here with us. Takes on flesh in the person of Jesus, breaks his body and sheds his blood for the world that he so loves. When we take the bread and we take the juice, we're remembering that's our God, and we are aligning our lives with that God. We're committing ourselves to be here, to be here, to be here, to be salt and light in this place, because that's what it means to be human, as Jesus would say. So I'm going to invite you to stand. If you are new here, if you've never participated in communion with us, everyone's welcome. The table's open. If you want to follow Jesus this week with us, come forward. We'll start in the back row, come down the center aisle. Our communion tables are here on the sides of the stage. You'll take a prepackaged communion element back to your seat using the side aisle, and you can take that during this last song. Let me pray. God, we thank you that you come to be here with us in and through your Son, Jesus. And we thank you that the presence of your Son, Jesus, is still here in the people that you've called, who believe in you and who seek to align their lives with yours. We want to be those people here in this place and in this time. Continue to do a good work in us, transforming us, that we would know you better, love you more, want to be more faithful to you, to love one another, and to be salt and light in this world that you so love. We entrust ourselves to you this morning. In Jesus' name we pray.
All this pain, I wonder if I'll ever find my way. I wonder if my life could really change at all. All this earth, could all that is lost ever be found? Could a garden come up from this ground at all? You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of